Before you start listening, I wanted to apologize for some of the audio in these episodes. If I had known at the time that I was going to turn this into a podcast, I would have done things differently. Some of the stories might not be in the order they should be, and some of the audio might cut in and out. This is because I had to edit out our private conversations. I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to be able to visit with Janice over the last few years and hear her story. She's an amazing storyteller and has a really neat story to share. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I did.
But we did a lot of lake fishing, not from the banks. We always trolled, and we did a lot of camping. But we'd go to Flaming Gorge or Fish Lake, and so I think it would be good for the grandkids and that to know that about their grandpa and their grandpa and grandma.
Right. So I remember you telling me too about two fish lakes, and I know the one was by where we live down in Richfield, but where's the other one?
The other one is farther south and quite a bit smaller, I think. We'd never been to that one. We were always at the big one, and we'd fish. It's a lot colder water. We'd fish for Mackinac. But the rainbow trout are really, really pink. Yeah, they're inside. Excellent fish. But we always fished. Well, in fact, Mom and Dad had a motor, and then we'd rent a boat wherever we went. We didn't have our own boat. Well, they didn't buy one until after we bought one when Pamela passed away. It was like a 10 Mercury 10 horsepower, and we did all of our fishing was trolling. Do you know what trolling is?
No.
Okay, so you have special lines. We use lead core lines, so they go deep. The lines, and we used what you call popinjay, and that's the thing that swirls and shiny. It attracts the fish. They called them flatfish, and they were all different colors and designs, but we trolled behind the boat. So the motor is you go really slow, and you'd find a spot where they were biting, and we just kind of troll in a circle around there. But you're really slow.
Well, I think there's quite a few memories too of the grandkids going fishing, like Matt and Jared going fishing with them and doing
and
that.
They had that pontoon boat too that they fished off. Because Scott, there's a lot of pictures of Matt and Jared and Scott, Michelle, and your mom. I think they had a motorhome and they towed the pontoon. They also towed the boat, but they traveled in that motorhome a lot with the grandkids. We must have been, I don't remember the tent. We camped in the tent, but I don't remember the first time. We must have been like 4 and 5 or 5 and 6 in that age group. But we used to camp with all the family, like Uncle Roy's family and Uncle Ted's family. And
let's see, how would you describe your spouse, and what do you admire most about them?
He is the kindest, most accepting, unconditional love, just amazing. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get frustrated with me. He just is so kind, and always thinks of others. Like he'd come up the other day, we were in town dining at Booger Bob's, and he said, what about taking some flowers to Judy Brzezowski? She's a our neighbor, and she's a recent widow of a year or two ago, and she's kind of struggling. I didn't think of that. He's always thinking of doing things, or what about taking, or what about doing, or always of others. He is so quiet, but he's extremely bright. I'll say, oh, just a minute, I'll go ask Dad, or tell the grandkids, oh, just a minute, Grandpa will know how to do that, or Grandpa will know how to make that, or
What do you believe is the key to a successful marriage?
communication and trust. Well, he's my very best friend, that I could tell him anything and he'll accept me no matter what. That he can tell me anything. It's kind of like also that we read each other's minds. He'll say something and I can finish it, or vice versa. Finish the thought. Or we've been married 60 years, and very few of them that I didn't have pretty severe medical, either broken bones or in the hospital or paralyzed or blind or didn't have any bowel and bladder control. Always right there to help me. Just being accepting. We don't try to change each other. I've heard people say, well, I thought he would change. I didn't think he would stay acting like that or doing that. You don't get married to change somebody.
I wanted to have you start off with the whole adoption process, cause how long after you lost Pamela did you decide that you wanted to adopt, and then how, I don't even know how that works or how it worked back then, and I'm sure it's somewhat different now, so if you can kind of go from the beginning of the process to how you ended up with Scott and all of that.
Michelle she was like a couple of weeks from being two when Pamela died, and it was that summer, maybe we should look into adoption, because when Pamela died, I knew that I'd never have any more children. When I had the cesarean with her and with Michelle, but Ed said they came out of the operating room and said that they needed to tie my tubes, and they wanted to do a hysterectomy, but I was hemorrhaging, and they didn't think I would survive another baby. And so it wasn't too long, maybe 4 or 5 months, that we started talking about it. And we were in Oklahoma, and at that time, going through the church adoptions, you had to be able to get to Salt Lake every 3 months. And that was an impossibility with us. And so once we realized we couldn't go through the church, then we looked into going through the state of Oklahoma. We got approval from the state, from Catholic Charities. Anyway, we were approved by the three of them. We said we'd take a boy, a girl, handicap. The one thing we wanted was that Michelle would stay the oldest. And it didn't have to be a little baby, that we would take an older child, but not older than Michelle. They investigated our families, in depth. And we had to go through financial, mental, spiritual activity, our jobs, all of this. Mom and Dad had to, and so did Leona and Vernon. I think probably the closest we came before we left Oklahoma was through Catholic Charities. Then Ed got orders to go to Vietnam, and so everything had to be put on hold. Even the state of Idaho, they wouldn't let us do anything until after he was back from Vietnam. We still couldn't go through the church at that time. It was just an impossible thing to go down in the middle of the week when he was training and flying. He was an instructor pilot in the RF-4s and the T-38s. So we went through the state of Idaho, and they investigated the house. That didn't ease up at all. And the years went by. Michelle was turning 6, and we were coming to Spanish Fork and camping with mom and dad, and your mom and dad, or your grandpa and grandma. And I called the adoption agency in the state of Idaho, and spoke to our caseworker. And I said, we really think we should just take our name off the list because there's going to be so much age difference between Michelle and whoever we adopt. And she said, no, Mrs. Hayhurst, we're positive you're getting a baby. Well, they already knew we were getting Scott, but couldn't say. And they didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl. And so we went on to camping. We brought your mom and Kay Swenson Johnson, our cousin. Let's see, Michelle was 6. Your mom had to have been 4. And Kay was right around Michelle's. And we brought them back, got home at 12 o'clock at night, and literally just dumped sleeping bags and everything in the living room, got the girls in bed, because Ed had to fly early the next morning, and we got a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning. So this was the first day of August, and he'd been born the 11th of July, and they'd been trying to locate us for 2 weeks because the birth mother wanted him in a home as quick as possible. And in Idaho at that time, from the day the baby is born until they're 6 weeks old, they are always in foster care. So that to make sure that the mom, the decision she'd made was what she really wanted to go through. So they called at 7 o'clock, and they said, we have a baby for you. You need to come to Mountain Home, find out about it, and he's in Pocatello. So literally, we took your mom and Kay and Michelle. We dropped them off at our dear friend Tamara and Steve Morgan's house there on base. They hadn't been fed. They were still in their pajamas. And Ed and I left to go to Mountain Home from the base and found out about him, when he was born, how much he weighed. He weighed 8'3" and was 24 inches long. And he looked just like a plucked chicken. He was so skinny. Anyway, Tamara and Steve had a key to the house. They came and got the girls some clothes and saw the mess of camping stuff in the living room. But anyway, Ed ran to the BX and got something for him to wear and some diapers. And we just grabbed the girls and said, we're going to Pocatello. We'll be back tomorrow. So we got to the motel we got to the office about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and they couldn't find Scott. He had been in 3 foster homes in that 2.5-week period, and had been abused in 2 of them. And she said, "We know he's okay. Go to the motel and we'll bring him." And so the girls stood out there on the sidewalk. And they brought him, and he was all dressed in pink. He had a pink nightgown on, pink rubber pants, and the blanket was pink. So we immediately unwrapped him, checked all his fingers and his toes and all this. And we had added, because he was so much bigger as a baby than Michelle, and so Ed had bought extra large, like footy pajamas. So Ed went to the drugstore, grocery store right down the road from there. Oh, and they gave it. We thought we were only going to have him for an hour, and they gave us one bottle, and said, "We'll see you at the office at 7:30 in the morning." So he went and bought smaller things, got smaller diapers, and he slept. All the time we're undressing him, he slept. He just slept all the time. We didn't have a bed to put him in, so we put him in a drawer on the floor, and your mom and Kay and Michelle all slept on their floor with their hands on him, waiting for him to wake up. And he slept the whole night. We didn't see his eyes or anything. He woke up, I don't know, maybe 6. We gave him the bottle, the only bottle we had. Checked out of the motel and thought, well, we'll just go sit in front of the adoption agency's office. And they had us sign temporary papers, gave us a couple of more bottles, and we headed back to Mountain Home. And we got there, I don't know, maybe 1 o'clock, and they called him Baby Boy Steve. We didn't have any names picked out. We never named the kids before they were born. And our neighbors and friends had got out the trunk with all the baby stuff, the nightgowns and things that they thought he could wear. There was a sign, there was food. The counters in the kitchen were just covered with food. They'd washed all the baby clothes and blankets, got the crib put up, washed all the camping stuff, put it away, and we had called our parents when we first got him, but we forgot to tell them where we were. They didn't know we were in Pocatello, so we didn't have a name. Mom and Dad came up with Aunt Helen. They came up to see him, and then we took him brought him over to Oregon a week later. But he didn't have a name for 3 days from us. And I was a volunteer. I was over the Red Cross volunteers for the base, and I worked at the pediatric clinic. So I called the clinic and I said, "Can we bring him over?" And my doctor friend, a pediatrician, I said, "Would you just check him?" Because you had to wake him up to feed him. He just slept. I'll bet he slept 22 hours a day for the probably first 2 or 3 weeks. caseworkers would come on base and check the house once a month. When Scott was 6 months old, you had to wait a year in Idaho. You couldn't give him a name and a blessing. You couldn't seal them to you. But at 6 months, I just think this is such a blessing. The caseworker, two of them came and said, "We see no reason why you can't adopt 6 months early. The judge agrees. Can you go to court on Friday?" And so we took him to court, Michelle and Ed and I. The adoption was finalized. We took him to, we went on Sunday. Mom and Dad came up. We gave him a name and a blessing. And the next weekend, we took him to the Provo Temple and had him sealed. And then, this is why it's such a blessing. 3 weeks later, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And had I been diagnosed then and had to have waited a year, he'd have been removed from our home.
Wow.
They wouldn't have let us keep him. And so and at that time, all I had signs of was blocked. I didn't have control of the bowel and bladder. No other signs. And they had done a spinal tap, and that told them what it was. But we told the caseworkers, you come in anytime, unannounced. We didn't care. The house wouldn't change. He'd be well taken care of. And they did. They were angry. She said, "You didn't tell us the truth." I said, "I did. We didn't." And I told him, we didn't know I had MS. So it was quite a process.
Jeez.
But he went for show and tell. I don't know if the kids have show and tell in elementary school anymore. But he went to show and tell once every 2 weeks. Richard and your grandma Fancy, they got him Levi's and Western shirt and cowboy boots, and Mom and Dad did. So he grew up wearing cowboy boots, Levi's, Western shirts. But he was for show and tell for a year. Everybody got to give him a bottle. But that was the process. It was quite a process. Yeah, and see, when we brought him home the 2nd of August, so he was just 3 weeks old, that he'd been in those 3 foster homes. Yeah.
Oh, that.
And abused in 2 of them.
Oh my.
He had lost quite a bit of weight. He was down to 7 pounds something. But the pediatrician, and I don't know what it is now, but you used to wait. They only had milk. Babies only had milk till, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 months. And then you could start out on rice cereal, nothing else. And the pediatrician, when he was about 3 months, he said, we need to get more weight on him. So he started solid food way before he was 6 months old. And he ate a lot. In fact, I don't even know if they still have them. But you'd put the baby food, the mush, in what we called it a plunger. And it was a thing with a nipple on it. And it had a thing you put your thumb in and you'd push in it. And he just sucked that food down like crazy. It had a pretty good size hole in the nipple. When I think of it now, it's a miracle they don't choke.
How did you choose all of your kids' names?
We didn't have a particular reason on any of them, except we wanted, Michelle doesn't have a middle name. She kind of looked like a little Indian baby. She was so dark-headed and dark eyes, and maybe we just thought about Michelle. Scott, the doctor that had delivered Michelle and Pamela, his last name was Scott. So I don't know why that name popped into our minds, but we wanted him to have Edward as a middle name. And Brent is Brent E. No particular reason for the kids' names.
What was your proudest moment as a parent?
I think what first comes to my mind when I thought about this was being in the sealing room in the Provo Temple, and they had Michelle all dressed in white, and Scott was in white, and Michelle was holding, her hand was on mine and Ed's, and we had him around Scott. And when I knew that security, that my family was together forever.
What did you guys do as a family with just like your little family? What did you guys do together when you had your kids?
Michelle and Ed and Scott and I did a lot of tent camping. We bought a boat after Pamela died and came back from Oklahoma, but I was getting sicker. I really had a hard time with the boat. So Grandpa and your Grandpa Richard bought our boat. We didn't do a lot of boating. Certainly when we were down in Utah, but we did a lot of camping. Spent a lot of time with family. A lot of time with your family and Grandpa and Grandma. But we did a lot of tent camping. We didn't ever have a trailer. We camped down the coast of Oregon and California a lot, and up to Wallowa Lake. Oh, this was funny. When Ed and I turned 30, our neighbors across the road from us on the base had a party for Ed, a surprise party. A couple of days before, I had cut my finger really bad and had to, on a knife, and had to have stitches. And so at that party, so Scott was there in a buggy, and he probably got maybe 15 pairs of those blunt end kid scissors with a string around it. Oh, this happened when we first brought him up here, right before his 30th birthday. But the scissors, he needed to rebandage my hand, and we brought Scott up here to introduce him to Leon and Vernon. So he was a little over 3 weeks old. Well, the scissors fell off the arm of the rocker, went through my foot, stuck my foot to the floor. I was bleeding. Michelle was trying to help me, and Ed passed out. Because he can handle anything with an animal, but with people he loved, blood and he are just not real close friends. So then his birthday's the 30th of August, and that's when they all gave him scissors with a string that he wasn't to cut anything unless the string was around his neck.
Let's talk about your profession and your job history. You graduated with your degree in, was it elementary education?
No, secondary education. I had always wanted to be a teacher. So I started teaching up here special education in 1985. that was something I always wanted to do, was teach and help children. My favorite age is the middle school, high school. But what I taught was K through 12, special ed. And I taught in small schools. Like North Powder was not more than 150, 200 students, K-12. And Huntington was about 100 students, K-12. And I only taught at Huntington for a year. But it all had to do with teaching children.
How many years did you get to do that?
16 and a half years.
Okay. And it was always special ed, right?
Always, yeah.
Okay.
That's what my advanced degree is into, is special ed.
What accomplishments are you most proud of?
I think being able to help people be involved in different areas, volunteering. So it seems like even when I was down with MS or when I was sick, I've always tried to be able to do like for others. So this is not a big thing, but for the last 3 years, I send out about 40 cards that I make on the computer, one a month. I send them out I send 40 of them, mail them. I can't be around people, but I pray about people that I know or that maybe could use a bright spot. And the cards that I make are always funny. Like one of them that just stands out, and it's not me. I mean, I make them on the computer, but I don't think up the thoughts or any of that. But I'm in the process of doing the April ones now, and they'll go out next week, the first week of April. But the one thought is, I was just thinking about you. Of course, something like you're right up there, right after chocolate and the lottery. So it's those kind of cards. And I just, but I still send them. But I always sent one to Richard and Natalie and Ed's two brothers and their wives and my sister-in-law, Ed's sister. But the rest of them are like, there's a neighbor here lost 2 of their grown sons in 11-month period. And they just really were struggling. So, but most of them are just women. We're very comfortable. We don't need a lot of stuff, but for the past 25, 30 years, and this is all anonymous, their family knows, but we never wanted it advertised. But any young LDS woman in our ward, we give a $500 scholarship and ask them to find someone that they're not close to, or maybe they think is weird, and become a friend. Not a close friend, but one that you would say hi and that you could talk to. And then if they choose to go to Utah State, they get $1,000. But only to Utah State, not BYU, just Utah State. So I think the accomplishment that our jobs, the good retirement, That's been an accomplishment that Uncle Ed and I hope after we pass away that will continue. And then I think just trying to stay positive, and the fact that they gave me less than 6 months to live 31 years ago, and I'm still kicking, so.
We kind of covered some of it. I don't know if that's what you like. What's one thing you want people to remember about you? Is it the positivity or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that nails it right on the head there.
We'd be staying at Scott and Jessica's, and Austin and Tanner are really close in age, and so they would come down from their room about 4:00 in the morning, and neither one of them talked real plain, and they'd stand to my side of the bed, and they'd say, "Ma, I want to sleep with you," and so I'd slide over, and Ed would slide over to the edge, and we'd put those two in the middle of us so they wouldn't fall out of bed, and they'd sleep with us. And so Jessica was pretty tired one day when we were down there. So when I finished with my doctor's stuff, I said, let us just take them home. Tanner had a bottle once in a while, but not very often. But I weaned Tanner. I told Tanner before he went on his mission, I think that's why we have this special bonding, Tanner, is because I weaned you. He laughed. We farmed. Now we're working. We're both working at our jobs, but we farmed this property up next to the mountain, maybe about 8-10 miles from us. And I was swathing hay, and I was not in a covered tractor. I was in the field below Ed, and Michelle and Scott, I don't know where they were, but Ed said, "Now check to make sure you don't plug. Always look behind you." Okay, I can do that. But he said, "Don't turn the tractor off." Okay, I won't do that either. So I'm tooling along, swathing hay, and I look back, and my swather is plugged. And so I raised it up, and I speared a skunk on his butt. So he's still alive, but the thing has gone through his butt. And so he's just wiggling all over. And of course, he's trying to spray. And immediately, brave me, who is afraid of everything, I turned off the tractor and running through the field up across the creek or the ditch up to Uncle Ed. And I just said, I can't do this. And he says, yes, you can. So he came down, killed the skunk, got it off the swather. So Ed is always there for me when I do my stupid things, calming me down and say, no, you can do this.